pull up a seat to the EduTable
with Nicole Biscotti and Melissa Sidebotham.
Welcome. We are so glad that you've decided to pull up a seat to the EduTable. My name is Melissa Sidebotham, and I'm here with my good friend Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Biscotti. The EduTable is a place for parents and educators to share ideas and perspectives. We feel that these conversations have become even more crucial with everything that we're dealing with and the impact that it's having on education and on our children. Today, we're going to be discussing the inequities in education that are being exposed during COVID-19.
As we talk about these, we have assembled a rockstar panel. So let's go ahead and get them introduced. First up, we have one of our friends of the show, Evan Whitehead. Please go ahead and tell people a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on again. My name is Evan Whitehead. I'm been a school district educator for over 20 years. I have been a central office administrator and had roles of director of special services and also assistant superintendent. And I'm also a national consultant, presenter, and speaker and mental health advocate. And I'm in the Chicagoland area.
We are so glad to have you back on the show. Next up, we have Amber Coleman Mortley. Amber, could you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi. My name is Amber Coleman Mortley. I am the Director of Social Engagement at iCivics. We make video games and civic content. I'm a former teacher of about a decade, and I'm a mom of 3. And I also run a blog, Mom of All Cakes. Please follow me on Twitter and everywhere.
She always has some great content, so you really should follow her. Next up, we have Noella Bickle. Noella, please tell everybody about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Noella Bickle. I am a mom of 2, including a middle schooler with ADHD. I've been working in education for 15 years in both private and public. I'm currently an assistant principal for guidance in middle school. So I work with counselors and 504s primarily.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And last but not least, we have Shelley Vora. Shelley, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm from Toronto and I'm also an educator and also coach and consultant. So I do consulting on the side. And I just came out of a coaching role due to some cutbacks. So they had to send us back to the classroom. So I'm doing a little bit of math and science right now and some ESL. And I'm also doing some projects and research projects with some universities here because I do have my PhD in ed tech. So I have a lot of projects on the go, and this is the way I like it. I like to keep busy.
Thank you all for being here with us tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time to pull up a seat and be part of our conversation. I'm excited to hear from all of you and also learn more from your different perspectives. Our first question tonight is actually from your perspective. What inequities already existed in education prior to this crisis? Evan, would you like to answer that first?
Sure. So, unfortunately, we are pretty aware of the inequities in terms of socioeconomics and also health disparities. And it's always been a struggle for public school districts in particular because at any given time, our demographic and our student profiles could change. And because of that, we've always had to be proactive. And we've always tried to have a balancing act in terms of how do we make sure that all the students that we have get what they need and when they need it. And unfortunately, we know about the access opportunity gap that often leads to an achievement gap. And then also in terms of risk and protective factors that within the environment that also impact a lot of our students and families. And, unfortunately now, since we've had to, pivot pretty quickly in terms of what our school day looks like, most of those inequities have been, highlighted or even magnified exponentially. So, the things that we once knew existed or thought were manageable, or we could at least find ways to support. Now, the inequities or inefficiencies that exist in terms of students and family needs now really has been highlighted due to this current pandemic.
Thank you for that perspective and your role as an administrator district wide. I can see that definitely you guys have to plan and be proactive about the gaps that students are facing. Shelley, I wonder from where you're at in Toronto and your role as coaching and having been in the classroom, what inequities were you very much aware of from where you were standing prior to the
Um,
crisis?
Before this pandemic, I think a lot of the inequities that I was seeing was the access to technology at home. Just the basic needs. I mean, I always go when I talk to educators and families, I always think of Maslow and his hierarchy, right? If those basic needs are not met, kids are not going to learn. And so, if you have kids who, are going home where there's no food, or they're in an abusive household, I mean, that's only going to be exacerbated now because everyone's stuck inside, unfortunately, right? So I worry about those kids, and it's just, in terms of access to food, access to basic resources, those inequities were definitely there before. And now with this pandemic, I just feel that the gap is even wider. And I worry about the kids that when we do come back, that's going to be even more transparent and apparent in terms of those the inequities.
Exactly. You bring up a great point that not all kids come to school on equal footing emotionally or feeling supported or having access to safety in an emotional sense. That's a very good point because that's a very real thing, and we're becoming more aware of it, but we have so much work to do in that area. Noella, as from your role as an administrator in a school and as a mother, what inequities were you mostly aware of from your perspective?
I from My district is a huge district. We have over 30,000 students, and it covers um, a large part of California, a heavily populated large part of California. What that looks like in any of those school sites is a huge range of students coming in. So, from the most affluent areas, um, students are coming from the most affluent areas, students are coming from multiple families in very small, tight quarters, working with homeless students. There's so many um, types of kids that we're seeing that it's hard as teachers, as educators, to be able to reach that broad spectrum. So you're going to see everything from food instability, housing instability, all of those. As Shelley was saying, if those basic needs can't be met, then certainly educational needs can't be met. And but at the same time, especially as students get older, that achievement gap keeps widening. And a lot of teachers are working so diligently to put all of their fingers, I think of the little Dutch boy trying to put all of his fingers in that dam, trying to, hold it all together. And um, looking at technology at home, looking at not only technology, the actual physical devices, but using it on a regular basis. So even if they're able to get a computer, the practicing of being able to use it, the support from parents and family that knows how to use it. There's so many pieces that go into it that the students are coming from so many varied places. It's not just, one group or two groups. It's an exorbitant number of groups where trying to figure out how to fill in all those gaps.
Definitely. And I think that something that you touched on when you're dealing with a diverse population, especially a large population, it becomes difficult as for us as educators to identify the different inequities because we certainly can't make assumptions. And a lot of times, if we're not extremely observant, and even if we are, unfortunately, we can miss a lot. Amber, what did you notice as being the inequities that you were aware of prior to the crisis?
Yeah, there's so many. I would say there's obviously inequities, historical inequities that have existed in this country on the lines of race and class, and how race and class intertwine with each other and manifest in the lives of students and their families, and how that creates the learning environment for them, whether good or bad. Your zip code obviously determining how successful or where you're going to land, or the chances for you to go to college. And then I also believe that there are inequities in what parents know, and what parents understand, and what parents can expect from their child's K-12 education. That can be across lines of class and race as well. Like, a lot of parents they just don't know what to do. And then also there's inequities as far as, which I'm passionate about, is like civic participation, right? Like, understanding like that you can make change in your community and make change on your school board and make changes at the local and state and even at the national level. And then understanding how government and politics actually work and impact your lives. So, there's inequities there. So there's so many.
I think you've all hit on, so many salient points here. And what I keep hearing over and over again is that the inequities that children were facing before this crisis, were innumerable and vast and great. And, you know, now as we are going through this crisis, and I think a lot of us are between 2 and 4 weeks into either shelter in place or this distance learning, and we're seeing a lot more things happen. How do you all feel that these inequities have changed since this crisis? Do you think that they're getting any better? Do you think that they've gotten worse? What are you seeing? Shelley?
I believe it's going to get worse just because even though like my board is committed, and many districts in our province are committed to providing technology to those kids who don't have it, and the Wi-Fi capability. That's great, but I just see it as a short-term strategy right now, and I don't believe that we're looking at the long-term impact of it. And I think I said in one of my recent blog posts is that digital inequity is not a strategy; it's a institutional commitment, and we can't just see it as something that we're just going to do right now. And when we get back to quote unquote normal, then we kind of put that on the back shelf and forget about it. And the other thing I worry about too, in terms of the gap, is that even if you do provide technology to these kids, I worry about the assault kids. The kids who don't have English, who are just beginning English language learners, and their parents are also beginning English language learners. How are they going to get supported? Those kids need face-to-face English language teachers to learn the language. I worry about those kids, like I mentioned before, who are in abusive households where that might be exacerbated now. I worry about kids who are in families where their parents have lost jobs and the parents are worried about how they're going to pay the bills. Learning is not going to be at the forefront no matter what technology they have. And I myself, like in my family, I have 4 family members who are in the medical field, and I worry about them because they're frontline workers. So if I'm sitting here trying to teach and also worried about my family members, that kind of puts added kind of stress, emotional stress on me. So if I'm an adult and I'm worried about my family members, I can just imagine kids whose parents are nurses and doctors and who work in hospitals, the fear they must be feeling about their parents getting sick. So there's so much to think about that even though we give the technology to these kids and we might continue with the food program. Those are some of my students I worry about in terms of um, keeping the learning moving and making sure they get those social emotional supports and just making sure they're safe. Like I worry about those are the kids I worry about the most because those parents who still have their jobs, those parents who are educated, who know how the system works, those kids will be fine. They're going to learn regardless. So those are the kids. Those are the kids I worry about. Those underprivileged kids, and I believe it's going to get worse. I mean, we're only in our first week right now of online learning, and I just find that as time goes on, those kids who are disadvantaged are going to continue. That gap is going to just increase as time goes on.
Right, right. Amber, did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
Yeah, I think, I've been reading a lot about this, speaking with, educators about this, how it's impacting their students. And I think a lot of us come from a place of privilege where it's like things were okay and now it's getting worse. And it's like for a lot of these students, their lives were already like this is just the rest of us pulling off the band-aid for real and like actually being able to see into the lives of our students. We have an idea, when the students come into our doors, we have a idea of who they are and what they can bring to the table. When they leave out our doors, we kind of have a tendency to think about, oh, maybe that child's life was terrible, but maybe not. They were here with me all day and now they're, not out of sight, out of mind, but more like they're at home now, right? But now because they are in their home and now because technology has placed us in the home with our kids, we are actually, as educators, being able to see what these students' lives actually are like. So for me, I think of it as this is not necessarily like things are going to get worse. Yes, divides will continue to widen, but this is a very important moment for us to say we are analyzing how society actually is, the way society is structured right now, and how it is operating in the lives of people in a way that we have never been able to before, and we have a lot of really tough choices to make.
I'm so glad that you brought up that point because I think it is incredibly true. Being able to kind of have that window into our students' actual lives has really made it impossible for people to ignore what's happening right in front of them, and that privilege is very real and it's all around us. Thank you for bringing that up. Evan, you said you had something that you wanted to add.
Sure. I would definitely agree with what Shelley and Amber said, and I would also note that for a lot of our students, the challenges that they have, as I said, have been increased, and from the social emotional standpoint, I think that there are a lot of students that have challenges that affect them every day, and I think now that they're at home, with with their family structure, and if there are certain risk factors that already were there in place, now the reality is that school for a lot of our young people was a safe place, right? It was consistency. It was the one place that for a lot of them could get away if things were challenging, in their home environment. But now they're forced to be there, and I think that you know if nothing more, I hope that this opens up our eyes in terms of an education system about the importance of social emotional learning and well-being, and how critical it is, because there's always been talk about that, but it's never really been on the forefront systemically. But now I think this crisis has caused that to happen, where the importance is more about the well-being of our students, well-being of our staff, even the families, because if there are any other challenge that they may have in terms of mental health and wellness, now more than ever, the main point is to support everyone in that way. And now I think it's going to provide an opportunity that everyone's truly going to see the value of looking at social emotional wellness, social emotional learning and competencies, and why it's so important in education setting. Because at the end of the day, if if those basic needs aren't met and students don't feel accepted, they don't feel safe, right? The academics don't matter. And right now this is an opportunity for everyone can see what that truly means, because this is a crisis, right? This is also a traumatic experience. So as much as we want to try to say that we're all maintaining or getting through or pushing through, like, this is something we've never expected. And it's another reason why I'm always cautious in terms of the way that I talk about what's going on now. And if I've referenced this as e-learning or distance learning, I'm also making sure that I reference it as this is e-learning, distance learning, or working remotely during a crisis. It's not the same thing as doing that when it's not in crisis, because there was no planning for this, there was no preparation for this. It happened instantly. And the other piece is that why we're talking about how to get through right now. The other part is we need to begin to plan on for what's next, because this is going to be the way that we're going to be doing business for quite some time. And even if we're able to return to being in the same room and being close physically and interacting, in person, the reality is that everything we've done now has changed the way that we look at education, the way that we operate, and we just can't decide to go back to the way that it was, because that's a huge shift. So we want to avoid like immediate transitions, because there is going to be there are going to be remnants of this that's going to happen, whether that means the wellness and social emotional well-being of our students and them coming back. We don't know what type of trauma they've experienced because of this situation at home. Parents, as we talked about earlier, parents may have lost their jobs, and financially things are tough. And even teachers, right? As educators, we now have these roles that are happening simultaneously. We don't have the ability to switch, and put them in compartments where we once did, in terms of teacher, educator, um, parent, and then spouse, significant other, and then possibly caregiver. Now all of that's happening at one time, and we have to, be very mindful of what that looks like and the type of pressure that puts on everyone, including the children that are in the homes, and including the families and adults as well.
Right, right. Well, and you bring up a lot of important points there, and one that I just wanted to kind of go back and touch on is you bring up how important that social and emotional learning piece is, and I think that a lot of those things have kind of gotten a bad rap, or people kind of latch onto them as buzzwords or things that you can throw around, you know, to sound cool, or to sound like you're talking as part of the in crowd or whatever you want to say. But I think with what we're going through now, it forces us to really understand the importance of them and how the impact that they actually have. Noella?
Yeah, I wanted to. Evan brought up some really great points that I wanted to um, look at as well. Um, what I've been feeling is that there's been a lot of certainly discussion about inequity. And I feel that from a general population standard, it's felt like we'll just give technology, right? Just give them a computer and that's going to solve everything. And Evan brought up how important school is for more than just we learn, right? We go to school, we learn things, we go home. Um, and I think that talking about the importance of the school in society is so crucial to our conversations right now, and what the school provides more than just education. That social emotional piece that's really been taken away from these students. They don't have the social that they used to. They don't A lot of students, this that was their emotional support. Their counselors were their social emotional counselors, and they've lost that. I know that, I'm privileged because I was able to have a my son's therapist have an online appointment, an online video appointment. That's not what the majority, I think, of the students have access to. And knowing that for as much confusion as adults have about this, for children that have even less control of the situation, that they don't have that social emotional support, and the importance that schools play in not only providing social emotional, but those basic necessities that we were talking about, those meals, um, the safe the safe space to be 5 days a week. I work with our school's homeless population. They don't have a home right now. They're, giving them a computer is going to solve nothing for what they're currently going through. Um, the numbers of, people filing for unemployment are so high right now. The children are processing that, they're seeing that, and they're not having the school support that they once had. And um, it does bring out those inequities more than just having that computer there. Our district is passing out technology, but I think about my families that don't have cars, that are having to take buses to try to come to meetings. Are they even going to be able to get that technology? The technology band-aid doesn't work for the issues that our students are facing on a daily basis.
That's so true. And you brought up, and Evan also brought up again, the fact that school is often a safe place for a lot of our students, and it offers so much more than just the academics. And we had Dr. Korb from the Center of Developing Minds on our show a couple episodes back, and we were just kind of getting into what this whole experience was like, and talking about the concerns that parents had in dealing with COVID. And he brought up this very dark piece that I don't think any of us in the conversation were really ready for. And he made it very clear that there are going to be a much higher number of domestic disputes and domestic abuse cases. And he even went so far as to say, if you keep guns in your home, make sure that they are taken apart and locked up, because there really is no place to go. And the stress level can be high, and we do need to be cognizant of that. And especially as educators, where we're reaching out to these families, we need to make sure that we are being cognizant of that very heightened stress level that they are experiencing right now, and really thinking about what kinds of additional services we can get them in touch with. Amber, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah. The point about social emotional learning in the place of the school, I think, over the past couple decades, we've kind of forgotten about the purpose and intent of school in the first place. School is a child's first foray outside of their own family and family values into community, and into helping them define what it means to be a citizen and what it means to be a participant in a community with people who are different from me, what it means to, explore new ideas and challenge my own beliefs and figure things out, amongst a group of my peers. And so I think that that's why our students are mourning the fact that they are not at school. I know my own kids who are home; they're pretty upset about it. Um, and I also think that the way that schools can foster community and belonging, in a way that you feel like I'm going to belong to my family no matter what, right? But schools have a very special way of developing within a child this sense that outside of my family, there is a place for me to go. There is a place where I feel welcomed and I feel like I belong. Yes, throwing technology is not going to solve this problem. A lot of the really great teaching techniques that I've seen my own children in my house, their teachers, they're continuing to foster that sense of community within that virtual space. And I think that that's the key to keeping these kids kind of locked in, and in a sane space, at least for that, 30 to 90 minutes that you have them virtually, is just to continue not just the social emotional development part, but also fostering like how do we stay connected? How do we build community? How do I allow you this opportunity to feel a part of something other than your family that you're definitely missing right now in this moment?
Absolutely. And that's a really important point, is that school does serve a purpose in our lives. It's not just about having content delivered to a computer. It is part of being it's a big part of being involved in a community. I know I teach high school, and when I think about my students and what they're missing in terms of socialization, and that's so important for them. And also as they approach senior year, and some of them are seniors, and thinking about what they want to do next, they're really lacking a lot of support that maybe some of them were only getting from school. Because I know, like, a lot of kids I work with and trying to figure out which school they want to go to and which programs, and they may not have that support at home, whether because parents aren't familiar with our education system, or whatever the situation might be. What I want to ask next is, what concerns do you guys have about equity going forward? So as we transition back from this, the situation that we're in right now, our leaders keep saying that it's not going to be a light switch, it's going to be a transition. I know that most of us are hoping that in the fall we'll go back to school um, on schedule. But what concerns do you have about inequity as we transition back in? Shelley, I wonder if you could answer that first.
Sure. I guess what concerns me, not so much, I mean, obviously the equity issue still is very concerning, but the one thing I do worry about is whenever we do go back, whether it's September or later on, depending on um, how much longer we're dealing with this. I worry again about, moving from how, I'm trying to phrase this in the best way possible, how as educators, how we treat our kids and their families right now, I think will impact how they view us when we eventually do come back face to face. I know in the States, many districts are using a variety of video conferencing platforms to interact with their students. Up in Ontario, we're not allowed to use any because of our privacy issues. So I can't even see my students. I can't even talk to them. Like, we're not allowed to use any audio conferencing or any video conferencing at this point. So all my contact with them has been basically through text. And because there's so many educators doing a great job, there are a few educators I see who are putting undue stress on their students right now, and I worry that when we do come back in September, whenever we do, I just worry about how those kids will view the system if we don't make changes right now. We don't start making changes and addressing those equity issues. And again, I think we've all mentioned the fact that it's just not about throwing tech at kids. It's more about, that social emotional aspect. So if we're not showing our kids that we care and that we want to make sure they have food on the table, we want to make sure they're social emotionally well. I just find that, and again, going back to that, the part about being in abusive households or parents who are stressed about the bills. I just worry that that's going to continue, just because even though the social restrictions might be lifted, until a vaccine is found, we're still going to be limited in what we can do. So I just worry about the fact that those inequities will continue, and it's a matter of putting a plan into place that's going to be long term and not just a strategy that works for the short term while we're dealing with the virtual learning. If that makes sense.
It really does. And one thing I was thinking while you were speaking, Shelley, is that we're talking about how we perceive the kids, but at the same time, we've also established that the inequities in many cases are more obvious. So where we may or may not have known what technology support, for example, the students have at home, or whether they had internet or not, now that's something that most of us know. So if you're a student and you know that your teachers in your school knew that they had to hand you a computer and knew that they had to point you in the direction of assistance for internet, it raises the expectation from us, I believe, as well as educators, because now students are coming in maybe feeling a little bit more like they've been a little more exposed. Things are a little more out there. And how are we going to address that? Evan,
Yeah,
what? Go ahead, Shelley. Sorry.
so yeah, I was going to say that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of when kids do come back, and how do we? Because I know my board said that once we're back in the building, though that technology will be returned that we gave the kids, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what message is that sending to our families and the kids in terms of addressing the equity issue? So shouldn't this be some kind of wake up call that maybe we need to be putting some long term plan into place where these kids continue to have the resources they need at home, instead of saying, okay, this is a short-term solution, and when this is all over, we're just going to take it back. That's not really addressing the digital inequity issue. It's like I said at the beginning, it's just a short-term solution, and it's not dealing with inequity at the institutional level. It's just giving the technology to kids right now as just as a strategy, that problem-solving strategy that works for now. But when we're back, we're taking the tech back from you.
Absolutely. And
I
what does
still have
that
a
feel
very
like as a kid?
hard time
And what?
wrapping my mind around that.
Absolutely. And what message does that send to the student?
Yeah.
And as we move forward and transition back in, none of us really know the effects of the trauma that we're all experiencing right now. Evan, you were talking about social emotional learning. What supports do you anticipate that a district could put in place to really support kids as they're transitioning back in?
Right. So, most districts will have a crisis plan, for when things happen, whether that, is the unfortunate situation of a death by a student or family member. If there's something tragic that happens, there's usually a plan. You know, that is going to have to be the way in which we plan in terms of transitioning, because this is a reentry, right? So, you know, we're going to have to now be able to support students, and educators, to so they can, function, into what one deal with what has happened before, but also, what's necessary. So I foresee that there's going to be a need for a lot of, mental health support that's going to be built in to what schools and districts need. So that may come in multiple forms, such as additional clinicians, social workers, school psychologists, counselors, etc. And then also, a lot of school districts here in the states, have employee assistance programs, and what that in terms of, when an employee is going through anything and that's personal related, or issues, I can see something like that being built in to, what's available, even on site, if not on site, but have a partnership with, maybe a mental health organization in which referrals can be provided or accessible, because we don't know what we don't know yet, and it's, to assume that we don't need to plan for that, transition back to, physical, space in terms of the learning environment, would be foolish. The other part is that, I think that, in terms of health services, there's going to be need to put a lot of support behind that. A lot of schools necessarily don't have school nurses, or if they do have a nurse, it may be an RN, or an LPN. It may not be a certified school nurse here in the states. With that, and we know that there's a huge need right now and a void in terms of certified school nurses. Very hard to find, very hard position to fill, and because of what's next and we don't know, you know, we're going to have to make sure that we are working on prevention and prevention strategies, more so than intervention, because we want to make sure that we can, try to at least decrease the likelihood of any type of, health risk happening before, more than we did before. So I think there's going to be a shift in terms of budgets and the way that budgets are created and what that looks like. The other challenge is that some of the pre-existing health disparities, that exist in terms of the prevention, in terms of healthcare, to be able to have that boost, to hopefully build up the immune system potentially, and what's needed. Those are other supports that will have to be built in, and it's going to take a true collaborative effort and collective impact between the school system, community-based organizations, and healthcare for physical and mental health as well to do this.
Emma, when I was listening to you, I found that your comment about preventative as opposed to intervention to be really interesting. I really like the direction you're headed with that, because in schools we do talk about intervention quite a bit, don't we? We don't always talk about prevention. And you're right. If there's going to be every student coming back to school, in my opinion, has experienced some form of trauma. We all have. And there has to be a way for us to learn how to mitigate that and to support everybody as they transition back in. Amber, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add, one of the biggest concerns for me is people forgetting about everything that we've experienced. I think humanity has this way, I consider it the etch-a-sketch effect, where we just kind of shake the picture away and then it's like, oh, we're starting fresh again. We're going to redo, we're going to go back to normal. Um, Poverty is a very, very deep problem in our country. It manifests in the school system and obviously in other places in our society, healthcare, et cetera. And we tend to forget that as citizens, we have the power to, at least at the local and state level, like pay attention to policies and vote for people who support the kinds of programs that are necessary to kind of prevent and even assist in improving the situations that we're experiencing right now. So, my biggest concern is that, on election day, people are going to forget that we've all been through this. Like, we've all gone through this, that this happened, that our students are experiencing this, that children in your neighborhoods are experiencing this, and that we're not paying attention to making sure that there are policies and programs in place that can actually solve the problems that we're all facing right now.
That's an excellent point. I love how you see the etch-a-sketch effect, and we do that. I always feel like that after the school shootings. We have these tragic events happen. Everybody gives their opinion on Facebook, it seems like, and then nothing changes. So I do hope that going forward, and maybe with this pandemic being more of a long-term problem that we have to transition out of, we can see some real improvement in terms of inequity. Nola, what are your concerns as we transition back?
I think a lot of it is similar to what Amber so eloquently said. In addition to forgetting, I also feel like there is this drive to return to normalcy. So this will just push through it, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The sooner we get back to normal, the better it'll all be, to the detriment of um, really acknowledging what those traumas are and figuring out what the traumas are, and and not focusing so much on, wow, we've lost out on 2 months of learning and let's get back on track for, we got to push that that instruction in there, and really just taking the time and the understanding to really get to the root of how this is going to affect all of us. And it's going to affect all of us in so many different ways, that this push to return to normalcy has to take a backseat to the mental health of not only our students, but our communities and the teachers that have had this trauma as well, taking teachers away from students. No one goes into education because they're looking to get rich and famous. They're there because of the kids, and there are kids. And there's trauma for the teachers as well. Um, and just not push, 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 but working through it.
Very, very true. And I think, listening to everything that everybody has said, I think that we can take a look at the one best suggestion that we can learn from this crisis is that we cannot return back to normal. We're going to have to create a new normal, and it's going to be imperative that we address the issues that these inequities that have really had that harsh spotlight shined on them, whether it be special education, social economic status, race, the digital divide, whatever it happens to be. I think that that's going to be the number one thing that we will need to take away from this moving forward.
Yes, definitely. And I want to thank you all for pulling up a seat and being part of our show today. Those of you that are listening, and as well as our panelists, thank you for being here with us today. Please reach out on Twitter or Instagram at the EduTable. We really love to hear from you. Also, remember to check out the articles and videos on our website at theedutable.com and subscribe so that we can deliver all of this original content right to your inbox. Thank you again for listening, and remember that children always benefit when parents and educators work together.
You can find this podcast on a number of different places, including Simplecast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, and now we're finally on iHeartRadio. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review, because the more reviews, especially the more positive reviews we get, the more we get seen and the more we can spread this content, this wonderful content, to more people. Thank you again, and we will talk soon.